Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ikoria spoilers. And I gotta say, before we talk about the cards, this set is absurd. Normally, we're now one day away from the full spoiler. Tomorrow we should get the full list. Normally by this time in spoiler season, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, talking about some like random bulk rares, but in Ikoria, we still have ridiculous cards to talk about today. So we better jump right into it, start talking about even more absurd Magic cards. First up today, we have one of our exclusive MTGGoldfish preview cards thanks to Wizards, and this one I'm not going to go super in depth about because you probably saw I posted a video. I'll stick a card up right now in the corner. I don't know if I did that right. I don't know how to point. Somewhere like over there, somewhere. So I'll stick a card in the video that you can watch the full spoiler video called A Brief History of Cycling Payoffs. But basically, Unpredictable Cyclone, 5-mana enchantment. If you would cycle a card, instead of drawing cards, you reveal cards from the top of your library. You exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a card that shares a card type with the cycled card. You get to cast it without paying its mana cost, and then the rest goes out the bottom of your library. Plus, you can cycle Unpredictable Cyclone as well. So, obviously, you can just play this in a deck with a bunch of mid-rangey / expensive cycling cards. Cycle, hit big things, get them for 2 mana, that's a fine deal. You can also try to break Unpredictable Cyclone, like play a single Street Wraith, a bunch of ways to tutor it up, a couple of Emrakuls. Every time you cycle Street Wraith, you know it's going to end up being an Emrakul from Unpredictable Cyclone. Plus, another competitive way to play this, I think, is in the Living End deck in Modern. If you've ever seen Modern Living End, they cycle, fill their graveyard, Living End off of Cascade to get all their cycling cards back. The problem is the deck is really weak to graveyard hate, like Leyline of the Void. Well, Unpredictable Cyclone, while not insane like Living End, where you just get a ton of creatures like on turn 3 or turn 4, if you get down to Unpredictable Cyclone, you just cycle your big cycling things, end up with big cycling things on the battlefield and beat down, no graveyard necessary. So minimum, I think this, from a competitive perspective, is a good way for Living End decks to get around graveyard hate, either main deck or after sideboarding. So this card is super fun. I expect it will be coming on an Against the Odds soon. If you haven't seen the latest Against the Odds, we just played some Progenitus last night. Check that video out as well. So thanks to Wizards for giving us a sweet spoiler card, and yeah, Unpredictable Cyclone. It is unpredictable most of the time, but still really powerful. Next up, we have what I believe is our second to last companion. We should have one more coming. Zirda the Dawnwaker. So this is our Boros companion. 3 mana, Boros hybrid mana for 2 of it. As for a 3/3 Elemental Fox, its companion ability is each permanent card, I'm not going to mess that one up again, each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. So you can still play spells, that's fine. You can still play lands because technically tapping a land for mana is an activated ability. So you can still play most lands. There's some that don't technically tap for mana, but as long as it taps for mana, it is an activated ability. And then, what do you get from Zirda? Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 Lects to activate, except the effect can't reduce the mana cost to less than 1. So it goes down to 1 at a minimum. And then we have an ability to pay 1, tap Zirda to make target creature can't block, which is kind of the added in ability. So Zirda is essentially like Biomancer's Familiar or Training Grounds, but massively upgraded. Biomancer's Familiar has the same ability as Zirda, except it only refers to creatures. It reduces the activated ability cost on creatures. Zirda refers to any permanent, which is a huge deal, and it allows for some interesting shenanigans that we'll talk about in just a minute. So what do you do with Zirda? Well, first off, many of the same combos that work with Biomancer's Familiar also just happen to work with Zirda. Like in Standard, there's a really janky combo where if you can get 2 Biomancer's Familiar, or now a Zirda in a Biomancer's Familiar, along with Kenrith and Fabro Elder and a sack outlet, not pictured, you can make infinite mana. Basically, you tap Fabro Elder for 5 mana because you're going to have ridiculous mana cost. Say Woe Strider is your sacrifice outlet. You tap it for 5 mana. You can sacrifice it to the Woe Strider. You can reanimate it for 1 mana with Kenrith by double reducing its last activated ability. And then you pay 1 to give it haste again with Kenrith. Then you tap it again for 5 mana. So essentially you're spending like 2 mana to make 5 mana, 2 mana to make 5 mana. So you're generating infinite mana as you go through this loop, and then eventually use that infinite mana to win somehow. So that's one of the combos that you could do with Zirda. In Modern, we've actually played Biomancer Familiar decks, and Zirda just does the same thing. The easiest way to go infinite in Modern is Eldrazi Displacer. With Zirda, Eldrazi Displacer's Blink ability costs 1 colorless mana. So if we can add in a permanent that makes 2 colorless mana when it comes into play, like Eyeless Watcher, which makes 2 Eldrazi Scions that we can sacrifice for a colorless mana, that's infinite mana. We just Eldrazi Displacer 1 mana, Blink Eyeless Watcher makes 2 mana in the form of tokens. Thanks to Zirda reducing Eldrazi Displacer's cost, do it again, do it again, do it again. Infinite tokens, infinite mana. There is one problem with this plan with Zirda, though, which is Eyeless Watcher does not have an activated ability. Eldrazi Displacer does. Zirda does. Many of the other cards we want in the deck, Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarchs, Dustwatch Recruiters, maybe Walking Ballistas, they all do. But Eyeless Watcher itself doesn't. Thankfully, there is a replacement in the format in Drowner of Hope. So Drowner of Hope, it is 6 mana, which is a drawback, but it does the same thing as Eyeless Watcher. When it comes into play, you get those 2 colorless Eldrazi Scions you can sack for mana. So Zirda, Eldrazi Displacer, Drowner of Hope, infinite mana, infinite tokens. The big deal is Drowner of Hope also has a tacked on activated ability where you can sacrifice an Eldrazi Scion to tap a creature. So if we use Drowner of Hope as our combo piece, then we can actually play Zirda in companion mode and have access to one of our combo pieces essentially in our starting hand every single game. And because Zirda only refers to permanents with its restriction, we can still play Collected Company. We can still play Court of Calling, all the creature tutors to set up our combo. So I think that is some of the ways you can play Zirda. Basically, I think of Zirda mostly as a combo piece, enabling degenerate combos. That said, there's some activated abilities in formats like Pioneer and Modern that Zirda can just be good with kind of fairly, like Walking Ballista, being able to play 2 to put a +1/+1 counter on it rather than 4, that's a big deal. Being able to spin the wheel with Urza for 3 rather than 5, activating Field of Ruin for 1 mana rather than 2, all of those things are nice upside value. Like, you could even maybe use Zirda in some sort of Death and Taxes style deck to reduce the cost of your Tech Edges and Field of Ruins and so forth, your sword equips. So there's lots of possibilities there, and by far the biggest thing that makes Zirda unique compared to previous versions of this effect in Training Grounds and Biomancer's Familiar is the fact that it works with any permanent, and this opens up incredibly busted combos in the Commander format in specific, and maybe Legacy, I guess it could technically work, but essentially, because Zirda refers to any permanent, it goes infinite with either Grim Monolith or Basalt Monolith all by itself. Basalt Monolith, let's say, taps for 3 mana. Normally you can untap it for 3 mana. Well, if we have Zirda, we can untap it for 1 mana because we reduce that cost of untapping it because it's an activated ability. So this gives us an artifact that we tap for 3, untap for 1, tap for 3, untap for 1. Infinite colorless mana. Grim Monolith does the same thing. Taps for 3, untaps for 2 if we have Zirda. So infinite mana, tap, untap, tap, untap, untap, untap. Win the game somehow. And remember, Zirda, even discounting the fact that you can potentially companion mode it in Commander, it's also a legend. So you can play this as your commander, play a deck that's just full of Enlightened Tutor type effects, any way you can to churn through your deck and find your combo piece. Play Basalt Monolith, immediately play Zirda from your command zone, and then you just combo off at instant speed. Like, even through a removal spell, tap, untap, instant speed combo off maybe as early as like turn 3, depending on the setup, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, if you start a commander game with Grim Monolith in your opening hand and Zirda as your commander, you just have infinite mana on turn 3. So this card is busted. It is so powerful. It does so many crazy things. I think it's got a chance to be played fairly. I think it definitely has a chance to be played unfairly. Gonna be really great in Commander with those easy infinite mana combos, but I wouldn't be surprised to see combo decks in Modern, even in Standard, potentially try to take advantage of Zirda as well. The fact that it does something that was already being played on the fringes in combo decks, in Biomancer's Familiar and Training Grounds, by reducing the activated cost of creature abilities, plus it gives you all these other possibilities by working with non-creature permanents as well, makes Zirda a really powerful Magic card. Speaking of powerful Magic cards, and I love this card more than most, Skycat Sovereign. So Skycat Sovereign is a 2 mana Azorius 1/1 flying elemental cat, but it gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying, and then you'd pay 4 mana to make a 1/1 white catbird creature token with flying. So Skycat Sovereign is basically Pride of Clouds. Pride of Clouds, if you followed the Budget Magic series, we've played a couple of different decks in Modern with Pride of Clouds. Pride of Clouds has the same ability. 2 mana Azorius 1/1 flying, gets +1/+1 for each other creature with flying in play, so basically the same exact thing as Skycat Sovereign. It has a weird way of making tokens, which I think is worse than Skycat Sovereign, so this is basically an upgraded Pride of Clouds for the most part, and there's a couple of reasons to be excited for this. First off, it's going to be insane in Standard with a bunch of flying creatures. If there's one thing we learned about Skycat Sovereign and about Pride of Clouds in the past, it's that it's essentially like a flying Tarmogoyf. If you play a deck that is dedicated to a bunch of flyers, it's pretty inconsequential to make this like a 4/4 flyer, a 5/5 flyer for 2 mana, and it even has the upside of making tokens in the late game. So we'll see. I actually think it's possible some sort of like Sephara, Empyrean Eagle, Joyous Skybonder, all flying random stuff tribal deck emerges in Standard with Skycat Sovereign being a key piece of it. It's going to be one of the best cards in that style of deck. The other place I'm excited for Skycat Sovereign is to revisit some of the old decks we played in Modern. If you remember some of the favorable wins decks we played with Pride of Clouds was one of the best cards in that deck, and now we essentially have 8 Pride of Clouds. So we can play all of our Mausoleum Wanders, our Judges Familiars, always have access, pretty much with 8 of them in our deck, to one of our Pride of Clouds / Skycat Sovereign effects on turn 2, make this massive flyer and use it to just kill our opponent really quickly in the air. So I think Skycat Sovereign is one of the best cats we've seen in a long time. I think it's going to see play in older formats, maybe in Standard as well. Of course, there is a cost. Like, you do need a bunch of flyers for Skycat Sovereign to be good, so you can't really just slot this into any deck. I don't think it's going to be worth it, although it is nice that it can grow itself by making those tokens from the battlefield. But I think in those flying tribal style decks, Skycat Sovereign, it's basically your like flying Tarmogoyf, and that's all you really want. This huge flyer to smash your opponent and close out games quickly with the support of all the other flyers in your deck. Speaking of power, good God, the Ultimatum cycle. So we have Ultimatum number 3 in Ruinous Ultimatum. This is our Mardu Ultimatum. So double red, double black, triple white, destroy all non-land permanents your opponent's control. This to me feels like one of the most absurd commander cards I have ever seen. It is essentially a sorcery speed Mardu Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift, literally one of the best cards in the commander format. I think that it might be the most played colored card, so you're discounting like Soul Rings and all that stuff, but cards that require colored mana in the entire commander format. It is like super duper ultra staple. If you're blue, you play Cyclonic Rift. Ruinous Ultimatum essentially does the same thing but better at sorcery speed. Rather than bouncing all of your opponent's permanents for the same amount of mana, 7 mana, you just blow them all up so your opponent can't replay them. You can clear away a bunch of blockers to get in an Alpha Strike, get rid of all your opponent's planeswalkers and artifacts and enchantments and creatures, you name it, it is going away. This card is absolutely busted. It is so strong. The only thing that holds back Ruinous Ultimatum is its mana cost. It is narrow in the decks that you can play it in because of the mana cost, but when you resolve it, this is Cyclonic Rift level power, and Cyclonic Rift is one of the best cards in the commander format. So we've seen watered down versions of this effect in Garruk's Wake. For 9 mana, destroys all creatures and planeswalkers you don't control. Plague Wind for 9 mana, all creatures you don't control. Ruinous Ultimatum technically cuts 2 mana off the cost of these cards, and in Garruk's Wake is like a top 50 black card in commander. It is one of the most played black cards in the format. Ruinous Ultimatum cuts 2 mana off the cost. It does add in a bunch of colors to narrow the decks you can play it in, and it gives it a strict upgrade by hitting artifacts and enchantments and planeswalkers and all permanents except for lands as well. So Ruinous Ultimatum, I think this card is going to be potentially good in Standard. If you look at our current Standard, people play a lot of planeswalkers. There's really powerful enchantments. There's Witch's Ovens, making tons of food tokens. These are all things you need to deal with, and Ruinous Ultimatum just gets rid of all of them for 7 mana. Yes, 7 mana and the tough mana cost will keep it in check. It's not going to like break the format because of the mana cost, but if you resolve this, there's a really good chance that you will just win the game. In Commander, I think if you're playing Mardu, outside of very rare exceptions, you just play this in your deck. It is the Mardu Cyclonic Rift. It is one of the best Mardu cards you will have in your deck. When you resolve this, you will probably win the game. It is absolutely busted, so I don't care if you're playing Callie or Queeber Chaser or Alicia or some janky Mardu commander. Ruinous Ultimatum is just ultra staple if you were in these colors. Like, it's hard to imagine effect that is better than this in Commander. We know how good Cyclonic Rift is. This is Cyclonic Rift fully powered and then some, actually getting rid of those permanents forever. So Ruinous Ultimatum, I think it's got a chance in Standard, and it's going to be absurd. Just absolutely absurd in Mardu decks in Commander. Next on our list, we have Offspring's Revenge, our Mardu enchantment from what seems to be a cycle of really powerful enchantments. So 5 mana enchantment at the beginning of combat on your turn. Exile target red, white, or black creature card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of the card, except it's a 1/1, and it gains haste until end of turn. So one of the things I like about this enchantment, from a power level perspective, is if you play it on your pre-combat main phase, you get to get a creature right away. You don't have to wait until your next turn, which is nice. So what does this compare to? And here there's a couple of different possibilities. It is kind of like Nightmare Shepherd. Nightmare Shepherd obviously needs to be on the battlefield when our creatures die, but it does the same thing, giving us a 1/1 copy of them. Offspring Revenge can come down later. We can have creatures die, self-mill, whatever, and then play this and then start getting value. So it's kind of like a Nightmare Shepherd with a different timing restriction, and obviously not on a 4/4 flying body. We also have God Pharaoh's Gift as a comparison. God Pharaoh's Gift, colorless, does something very similar, except it made 4/4s instead of 1/1. So God Pharaoh's Gift, obviously, at 7 mana, that's a lot for most decks to cast. It was mostly cheated into play. Offspring's Revenge is much more castable, but God Pharaoh's Gift also made 4/4s, which were realistic threats for closing out the game. Just like a free 4/4 every turn wins a lot of games of Magic. A free 1/1 every turn, not quite as good. So how do we take advantage of Offspring's Revenge? And I think, similar to Nightmare Shepherd, one of the easiest ways is creatures with Enter the Battlefield effects. Like, you can Grey Merchant, sacrifice Grey Merchant, or just have it die naturally. Get back Grey Merchant. You're essentially getting 2 Grey Merchant triggers for the price of 1 with Offspring's Revenge. Playcrafter, Charming Prince, anything with Enter the Battlefield triggers works really well, because with cards like Grey Merchant or Charming Prince, you don't really care if they're 1/1s. Like, they're not about attacking anyway. That's not what they're in your deck for. They're in your deck because of their powerful Enter the Battlefield ability. So you kind of minimize the drawback of your creature coming back really, really small by having creatures with powerful Enter the Battlefield effects. You can also do some sweet shenanigans with other styles of creatures like Perforos, Ilharg the Razeboar. You get back one of these creatures, and then you get another creature for free. Plus, like Ilharg, yes, it's nice that it's a 6/6, but if you're slamming something even bigger into play for free, that's still fine. Or Perforos, it's going to be indestructible. It can still put creatures into play. So is being a 1/1 a big deal? No, not especially. So that's another way to go. The coolest thing I think you can do with this card, and I don't know what format you do this in. My first thought was Commander, but you can only play one of these cards. Maybe you could do it in like a janky Modern or even Pioneer deck, but is using creatures that give you extra combat. So let's just say you're playing, I don't know, Pioneer, and you have 4 Combat Celebrants, you have 4 Aurelia the War Leaders. What you can do is try to fill your graveyard, then you play your Offspring Revenge. You go to combat, you get back your Combat Celebrant, you use your Combat Celebrant to get an extra attack step by exerting it, which means you're going to get another Offspring's Revenge trigger, because you go back to the beginning of combat again, then you can get back like Aurelia, let's say, and Aurelia attacks, and you get an extra combat step, and then on your extra combat step, you can get back another Combat Celebrant, and exert it, and keep chaining through a whole bunch of attack steps, building this massive board, and getting in with your normal creatures as well. In Commander, you can do the same thing, but like I said, you're kind of limited by the fact you can only play one of each extra combat step creature, and there's just not that many creatures that give you extra combat steps, but some of them are very good. Like Godo can tutor up combos, give you even more extra combat steps. So Offspring's Revenge, I think, is a pretty powerful card. I'm not exactly sure where it fits. Like, I can see the shenanigans you can do with Offspring's Revenge as kind of like a mini God Pharaoh's Gift, kind of like a weird take on Nightmare Shepherd. Is it better than actual Nightmare Shepherd? What are the advantages? What deck does it fit in? I think that's the big question. But if you're a deck that's filling your graveyard and has a lot of Enter the Battlefield triggers, Offspring's Revenge, while also having pretty sweet flavor, is a pretty powerful card. We also got Ultimatum number 4. So getting near the end of our Ultimatum list, Splendid Ultimatum, our Jeskai Ultimatum. And so far, for the last 2 days, I've just been gushing about how strong the Ultimatums are. The Jeskai Ultimatum, it's fine. It's still powerful, but it's nowhere near on the level as the other Ultimatums we've seen so far. So Splendid Ultimatum, double blue, double right, triple red. Target player gains 5 life. deals 5 damage to any target, and you draw 5 cards. So basically, for 7 mana, you are getting a decent amount of value. You get to gain some life to stabilize, kill something, draw 5 cards. That's a fine effect, but it's nowhere near the I win the game effects that we've seen with the other ultimatums. Like, literally reanimate everything in your graveyard, or tutor up 3 things that are combo pieces and win the game, or blow up all of your opponent's permanents. There's nothing like that with Splendid Ultimatum. This is definitely, in my opinion, at the very, very bottom of the ultimatum ranking. It does kind of remind me a little bit of Cruel Ultimatum, the way it works, where you're like gaining life, drawing cards, being able to stabilize by killing something. So it does have some Cruel Ultimatum mixed in with it, but I'm actually not sure if this is even better than Cruel Ultimatum. And I think I have recognized the reason that Splendid Ultimatum is not as exciting as the other ones. And the reason is white mana. If you look at the effects of this card, 5 damage to any target, that's probably worth about 5 mana, let's say. Sharken's Rage, yes, it maybe can damage you a little bit, but basically the going rate to just deal 5 damage to anything you want is about roughly 5 mana. And then drawing 5 cards, there's actually not a blue card I could find that literally draws 5. There's like draw 4s and draw 7s, but not draw 5. So I went with Promise of Power, which draws 5 for 5. It would probably cost a little bit more as a blue card, like 6 maybe, or even 7, because you're not losing the life most likely. But let's assume that's like 5 to 6 mana worth of cards. So we're off to a good start. We have Sarkhan's Rage, that's 5 mana for the red ability. We have Draw 5, which is worth 5 or 6 mana for the blue ability. Then we have the white ability. And the white ability, gaining 5 life, it's a 1 mana effect. It's Chaplain's Blessing. So we got off to such a good start with the removal and the card draw, and then white just ruins everything. Having that added on, just like the weakest possible effect, it's so ridiculous. The other effects are so strong, and then the Chaplain's Blessing gain 5 is just so incredibly weak. So Splendid Ultimatum, I'm giving it a hard time, not because it's a bad card. Like for 7 mana, you're still getting fine value. Kill something, gain 5, draw 5. That is still worth 7 mana. Even in our breakdown, even including Chaplain's Blessing, the gain life mode is a 1 mana effect. It's still worth more than 7 mana. It just looks bad compared to how busted the other ultimatums are. So it's not that Splendid Ultimatum is not powerful. It's still a powerful card for its mana cost. It's just not as busted as the rest of the ultimatums we've seen over the last couple days, which makes it look bad in comparison, not in a vacuum. We also got Slither Wisp, and this is a card that seems pretty strong. We're getting a lot of flash support in Ikoria. Slither Wisp, double black and blue, Nightmare Elemental, flash. Whenever you cast another spell with flash, you draw a card, and each opponent loses a life for a 3/2. So this card, it feels like it has ready-built homes. We already have a lot of good flash cards in Standard. Brazen Borrower, Brineborn Cutthroat, Ashiok, the Simic flash decks. We've even seen some Dimir flash decks already. Having a card that draws you a card whenever you cast a flash creature is actually incredibly strong, because what you want to do in the flash deck is play the tempo game. How do you play the tempo game? You stick a threat, then you play counter spells, or even like Ashiok's Erasure, a counter spell that can trigger your Slither Wisp. So you play a threat, you protect that threat with counters as you beat your opponent down. You know what is really helpful with that plan? Drawing extra cards to fight through like hitting too many lands, to make sure you always have a counter, to make sure you have more flash threats. So Slither Wisp is built for a flash style tempo deck. We already have a lot of support, and that doesn't even include all the new support coming in Ikoria. Cunning Nightbounder works really well with this style of deck. Sea Dasher Octopus. I've heard some people talking about this being one of the literal best cards in the set for Standard. Even Voracious Great Shark, yes, I know it's 5 mana, but a big body that counters something and draws you a card and is maybe uncounterable and getting cheaper thanks to Cunning Nightbounder is very strong as well. And we also can just go Dimir. Going into Dimir adds some interesting cards that you might not traditionally see in the Simic flash deck. Lockmere Serpent, really good big flash finisher. Dirgebat, a new addition, a flashy removal spell that can be a 2-for-1 Blacklands Paragon, can take down big creatures. And we haven't seen the lands yet from Ikoria, but if the mana base is good enough, you might be able to just go full on Sultai and have your cake and eat it too, having Slither Wisps with Frilled Mystics and Nightpack Ambushers and Wildborn Preservers and Brazen Borrowers and all the other cards we've been talking about. So Slither Wisp to me feels like an all-star in a flash deck. the extra card advantage in specific is very, very strong in a tempo style deck, which Flash is, and Slither Wisp is one of the easiest ways to do that while leaving up your interaction to your counter spells. So we'll have to see. Flash has a ton of tools in our current standard format. It feels like one of the archetypes that has gotten the biggest boost of power from Ikoria. Where's that going to leave us as far as standard is concerned? How much does Teferi ruin that plan? We're going to have to see, but I feel like Flash definitely has a legit shot in standard, and Slither Wisp is a great piece of that puzzle. We also got Whirlwind of Thoughts, a kind of interesting Jeskai enchantment. So 4 mana in the Jeskai colors. Enchantment, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to draw a card. What more could you want than drawing cards? So Whirlwind of Thought kind of reminds me a little bit of Niv Mizzet Perun. It has the same type of ability with a bit of a twist. Niv Mizzet only triggers on instant or sorceries, but it triggers on your opponent's instants and sorceries as well. Whirlwind Thought only triggers on your stuff, but it triggers on any non-creature. So artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers. Another easy comparison, I think, is Jeskai Ascendancy, which is a card that at various times was broken in Standard, was broken in Modern, has been played in Pioneer. The difference is Whirlwind Thought doesn't generate mana. Part of what made Jeskai Ascendancy so broken is the ability to untap all of your creatures so you can play random mana dorks, cast a bunch of spells, keep tapping your mana dorks for mana and untapping them so you can cast more spells and really churn through your deck. On the other hand, just for being straight up card draw, Whirlwind of Thoughts is better because Jeskai Ascendancy just loot. So you're drawing and discarding. Whirlwind Thoughts actually generating card advantage. So what do we do with Whirlwind Thoughts? And my first thought was to play it in some sort of Wilderness Reclamation deck. Those decks already really spell heavy. Those decks already want to draw cards. Those decks could probably figure out a way to throw some, Jeskai mana into their deck. They're already pretty close. You just got to find a way to get some white mana in there. They're often teamer anyway. And then your Wilderness Reclamation's drawing you cards. Your Op's drawing you 2 cards. Your Growth Spiral's drawing you 2 cards. So if you can get Wilderness Reclamation to double your mana with Whirlwind of Thoughts, things should get really crazy really quickly. Also, in older formats, maybe some sort of Storm style shell, like having your Desperate Rituals and Pyretic Rituals come with a kicker of drawing you a card seems really powerful. Is this better than other Storm finishers, especially considering you need Jeskai mana? I don't know, it's kind of competing with stuff like Past in Flames, which essentially draws you your entire graveyard. So I don't know if it'll actually beat out other options, but it gives you an idea of some things you can do with it. The other important thing to note about Whirlwind of Thoughts is that non-creature mode, rather than instants and sorceries, which means Whirlwind of Thoughts, it can be like an Enchantress almost, in an enchantment-based deck, like you're Banishing Light, coming down for removal, drawing you a card. So maybe there's some sort of enchantment-heavy Planeswalker control deck, because you know what else is a non-creature? Planeswalker, so your Teferi is now drawing you a card when you cast it as well. And in older formats, maybe some sort of weird artifact deck. We have cards like Chromatic Sphere, we have free artifacts like Mishra's Bauble. Having them all draw a card, or in the case of Chromatic Sphere, draw 2 cards when you sacrifice it. I'm sure there's a way to reduce the cost on your artifacts to make them free, and then just use Whirlwind of Thoughts to literally play through her whole deck and probably get a Storm style kill or something. So Whirlwind of Thoughts, the card's really powerful. The restriction is low. If you attack with this in a deck that actually wants it, that can support it, it should be really bonkers. So we'll have to see where this card shows up, but the power level is very, very high. There's no safety valve on this one. If you attack with it with a bunch of spells in your deck, you should be able to play a huge chunk of your deck, generate a ton of value, and maybe even win the game. We also got Winota, Joiner of Forces, and this card is pretty powerful. This is a Boros human warrior mythic, 4 mana 4/4, and it has a pretty sweet attacking ability. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You can put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attack it, gains indestructible to end a turn, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this is kind of a companion mythic. Basically, you want your deck to have a mixture of humans and non-humans, and there's a few different ways that you can build around Winota. When you read this ability, the first thing that pops into my mind, at least, is, all right, what massive humans can we come into play? And do you want to take a guess at what the literal biggest human in all of Magic is? As far as converted mana cost, the most expensive human in Magic, the answer is Of course, Scornful Egotist. Humans top out at 8 mana. Scornful Egotist is literally the highest CMC human in Magic, tied with a couple of other creatures. So I don't think you actually want a Scornful Egotist, obviously. Getting a 1/1, not that exciting. But there are some sweet humans you can hit. I think Gigantomancer is probably one of the best of the bunch. You can attack with some non-humans, get Gigantomancer for free, and then use your mana to turn your other creatures into 7/7s and maybe just win the game. There's also some other sweet options. Angrass Marauder is essentially like a Furnace of Wrath that's a human. Agent of Treachery in Standard comes down and steals something. Lina Selfless Champion to make a big board of things. So I think Winota can try to put big humans into play. But really, if I think about how this card is actually going to work, I don't think that's necessary. Like, free value is free value, and the way that Winota is worded, whenever a non-human creature you control attack, not one or more or anything like that. So in theory, you should get a trigger for every non-human you attack with once Winota hits the battlefield. So you play some random stuff on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, play Winota, go to combat, attack with your non-humans, and you're likely going to get 3 extra bonus creatures, which is really powerful, and we already have decks that just incidentally have some humans and non-humans. Plus, remember, this is a 4/4 for 4, so you're already getting a fine body. So let's say you're playing some sort of whack style deck in older formats. You have Burning Tree Emissaries, you have Hidden Herbalists. Are these like insane cards to hit off of Winota? It's not Agent of Treachery, obviously, or a Furnace of Wrath, or anything like that, but getting free 2/2s for what your deck is already trying to do when you just attack with your Wild Mikados and Goblin Guides, that seems pretty legit. You're just adding a bunch of free power to the battlefield, and even though the creatures are small, since they get indestructible, they're going to stick around through at least one turn. We also have some Death and Taxes style decks where you have Mirran Crusaders, Enthalias, and Noble Hierarchs. Is it super thrilling to get a Noble Hierarch? No, it's not an Agent of Treachery, but for free value when you're already attacking with your random creatures, that seems super fine. And then maybe some of my favorites are like Seasoned Pyromancer. We have like Croxa decks, Lightning Skelemental decks that are all about attacking. In these decks, you play Winota, you attack with your Skelementals or whatever, and all of a sudden, you're getting a free Seasoned Pyromancer, a free Dark Confidant that's not going to die in combat because it's indestructible, and then you start drawing more cards. So I think Winota is actually just incredibly powerful. It's weird because it doesn't actually fit into human tribal. You do need a mixture of non-humans and humans for Winota to be good, but if you just incidentally have about half humans, half non-humans, Winota offers an insane amount of value, and the fact that it does not need to attack. It just has to be on the battlefield. Makes this really powerful. It essentially works as if it had haste, and that's the most exciting part of this card. Just imagine curving out 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, non-human creatures. Play Winota, attack with those 3 creatures. There's a decent chance, if your deck is like 50-50 human, non-human, that you're going to end up with 3 extra bonus creatures. That is incredibly frightening. So Winota, this card is going to do things. I think this card is an incredibly powerful threat for aggressive creature-based decks, possibly even going back to older formats like Modern and Pioneer, and definitely in Standard, and it's a legend, so you can make it your commander if you want to do those sweet shenanigans. So just all around Winota, really, really strong Magic card. Last and I guess actually least this time, we have some lower rarity stuff. Some of it's kind of interesting though. Flame Spill is essentially a burn spell that has trample, 4 damage to a creature, and then extra damage goes over to the player. So if you kill, let's say, a X1 with Flame Spill, you kill the creature and 3 your opponent. Not a bad removal spell. Fire Prophecy, another interesting removal spell, 3 damage to a creature for 2 mana instant speed, plus you can put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library to draw a card. So kind of some looting-esque abilities built in with a removal spell, which is really nice. Of One Mind, pretty powerful if you can meet its cost reduction restriction of a human and a non-human creature to draw 2 cards for a single mana. Otherwise, we get more mutate stuff, an interesting colorless basic land finder, although unfortunately it goes to hand, so I don't think it's going to be broken in Commander. And that brings us to the end of our daily Ikoria spoilers for today. So what do you think of all these new cards, the new ultimatums? How busted is Ruinous Ultimatum, our Mardu Cyclonic Rift that blows up everything of our opponents? Splendid Ultimatum, is it better than I'm giving it credit for? What about the other enchantments? Offspring, Revenge, what do you want to reanimate with that? Are exclusive preview card, unpredictable cyclone. What busted things can we cycle into? Our new companions, Zirda, what does that enable by reducing the cost of our activated abilities, apart from just going infinite with Monoliths and Commander? Our new Flash stuff, the lower rarity stuff, Whirlwind of Thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.